This is Mindset, mental health news and information. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, James Curtis. What we do here on Mindset is more than just bring you cutting-edge news and information about mental health. Instead, we connect that news with stories about everyday life, from parenting to relationships to living with and even thriving with a serious mental health issue. So, take the Mindset Challenge. Dare to see mental health differently. On today's show, it's National Suicide Awareness Month. The question: does talking to someone about suicide increase their risk of suicide? That's our main topic today. What would you do if someone told you they were thinking about suicide? If you talk to them about it, will it just encourage them? Or do you think you can't stop them, so even if you wanted to, there's nothing that anyone can do? Well, for starters, the answer is not just call 911, at least not at first, and maybe not at all. My guest today is Richard Ramsey, president of the Canada-based organization Living Works, whose mission is suicide prevention. But first, this news from the Mindset Report. The Mindset Report, available online at mindsetreport.com. The Mindset Report, your most comprehensive online source for mental health news. This week's Mindset Report is underwritten by Haven Insurance, your complete insurance resource for home, business, and auto, offering a written money-back guarantee. Find them online at haveninsuranceinline.com or call them toll-free at 877-4HAVEN-4, 877-442-8364. From U.S. News and World Report, even though taking time off work makes for healthier employees and a more productive business or workplace, because, the theory goes, less stressed employees are more productive. But even when they have it, employees don't take all of their sick leave or vacation time. U.S. News healthcare reporter Kimberly Leonard spoke to me about why. My guest is Kimberly Leonard, healthcare reporter for U.S. News and World Report, online at usnews.com. Two of your recent articles were very intriguing to me. One is entitled "Employees Tend Not to Use Generous Benefits," and the other, people in general not understanding what the sources or the reasons behind suicide are. Let's take the first article. Your article starts out, I won't say provocative, but a pretty cool line. American workers are afraid to take a break, even in places where they receive generous family leave or vacation days. These benefits are intended, one, to recruit top talent, but two, aren't helpful to workers in some office cultures. Tell us what you found out about why.
Well, even though you might get a certain amount of vacation every year, if you're the average American worker, you're probably not using all of your vacation. And there are several reasons for that. One, you think that taking time off will only give you more stress later on and catching up on the work that you missed. And two, that the office culture that you're in doesn't really promote taking a break. And in fact, it's frowned upon to take the time off, even though it's provided for you within the benefits as an employee.
One of the individuals that you talked to in doing the research for your article was David Ballard, and he is the executive director for organizational excellence at the American Psychological Association. And he talks about this idea of culture, but at the same time, you note that not all companies or organizations are created equally, and you cite a couple of the Silicon Valley employers like Google.
Well, they have a reputation for really pushing their employees really hard, and they also have a reputation for having really great benefits, such as free meals, good benefits in terms of family leave, and in terms of being able to take care of a new child as a new mom or a new dad. But every once in a while, then you'll have sort of these conflicting messages. One person who has received a lot of criticism is the CEO of Yahoo, Marissa Mayer, because they have pretty generous family leave at Yahoo, but she has said with the birth of her twins that she'll only be taking 2 weeks. And there are people that think that sends a message to your company that if you want to be successful and if you want to work at Yahoo and be successful in that role, then that means not taking the full leave that is given to you. Now, there are others who would say some people just work differently. They don't need as much time to recover. And really, though, she's getting a little bit of criticism because she is supposed to be setting an example to the rest of her employees, and a lot of people see that as setting an example that taking a break is not acceptable.
Another company that's come under fire per the recent report of the New York Times is Amazon, with the idea, similarly to the Yahoo example, that employees were heard to complain that while the benefits are generous, the culture doesn't really support using them to the full extent.
Right, and there are plenty of current workers at Amazon who have come out against the piece and said this hasn't been my experience at all. But then there are others who say, well, these benefits might be there, but if everyone on my team is going to look at me negatively, and if I'm not going to get promoted quickly by taking this time off, there's no point me taking it off. Particularly those who are driven by their careers and see their careers as a way to onto the next thing and onto the next step within a company. One of the things, though, to, I think, keep in mind that's really important is just that employees function differently, and to find the right fit and to find the right level of work-life balance and stress means different things to different people. And so there are some people who really thrive under that environment, who work a lot, who actually are able to recharge with constantly working and constantly being busy. But that's not the right environment for everyone. But I do think it's important to note that for some people, they really aren't interested in using all the benefits that are given to them because they like being at work.
And at the same time, the statistics show, and the numbers that you cited in your report, as discussed by another one of the experts that you spoke with, Stuart Friedman of the Wharton School, talks about the idea that employers actually do benefit when their workers do take time off. Employees understand that, but they still are reluctant, not really fully appreciating the bad stuff that can happen to you if you don't take time off. And you mentioned some of those. Review some of those with us.
Well, work stress, and again, stress comes from a variety of factors. It might not necessarily be true that just because you don't take a vacation that you're too stressed, but taking rest is supposed to be good for you. It goes back to kind of the idea of taking, in certain religions, taking one day off of the week to rest. And even though we know that we enjoy vacationing and traveling and doing different things with our brains, we don't always do those things, even though we know they can be re-energizing for us. And so there was a study that came out just before Labor Day, and this piece was kind of to go in conjunction with Labor Day, that looked at the effect that work stress has on people. And again, work stress can come from a lot of different places. Sometimes it can just come from working with someone who is difficult to work with rather than working long hours, for example. And so one of the things that it said was that high job demands increase the odds of having a doctor-diagnosed illness by 35%, and long work hours increase the chances of early death by almost 20%. And so stress really can play into some of the other health issues that lead to heart disease or to high blood pressure or depression, anxiety, that can reduce a person's wellness. And that's why rest is supposed to be important to recharge. But again, people take rest differently. Some people require more rest than others. And I think finding the right work culture that has the balance for you is really the way to approach this.
Another article that you did, Americans Don't Understand Risk Factors for Suicide. Stress is one of those risks.
So it's National Suicide Prevention Month, and so that's a lot of the reason why studies are being released about some of the issues around suicide and around stress. And the reason the study was released was because a lot of people understand the risk that depression plays in suicide and the risk that mental illness can have, but they don't often know that the role that anxiety can have in it. There are plenty of Americans who say that they experience anxiety regularly.
Kimberly Leonard, healthcare reporter for U.S. News. You can find her online at usnews.com. You can follow Kimberly, like I do, on Twitter at LeonardKL. Connect with her on LinkedIn or circle her on Google+. Kimberly, thank you so much.
Thank you, James.
For these and other mental health stories, check out the Mindset Report online at mindsetreport.com. Today's topic, is it dangerous to talk to someone who tells you they're thinking of suicide? We're back in just a moment. Mindset, Mental Health News and Information. I'm your host, James Curtis. Today's topic, is it dangerous to talk to someone about suicide? What should you do if someone tells you, even subtly, that they're thinking of suicide? Well, to have the conversation, you have to start by examining your own attitudes, our own attitudes about suicide.
Richard Ramsey's my name. I'm president of Living Works Education, a company based in Canada, but now operating in Canada, the United States, and Australia, and in partnership with several other national organizations in different countries.
The reason why I came to know about you is because I had the pleasure of taking one of the classes that you offer through Living Works called Safe Talk. And before we drill down and talk about what Safe Talk is, first of all, let me say everybody needs to know what Safe Talk is. Everybody needs to understand and be exposed to this information. It's for the amount of time that it takes. It's a 4-hour training course. It is life-changing.
We started out in the 70s and the 80s and discovered from various studies, some of which were based in the United States and in Canada, that said there was a growing body of knowledge in suicidology, the study of suicide, but the body of knowledge wasn't being translated in any kind of practical way to those who needed it most, those who were in the front lines of helping, whether they were professional social workers, lay helpers within crisis lines, and so forth. And so we set out to develop, in those days, what was considered a knowledge and skills program, and discovered that one of the key components of it, subjects as sensitive as suicide, has to do with the attitudes that people bring to the subject matter. And in many cases, we talk about stigma and taboo, and that applies to suicide as it does to other issues in the mental health field. And that nobody was addressing the attitudes that people are often bring to them in a knowledge and skills training curriculum. And in many cases, people sit on those attitudes and they don't change them, even though they go through the motion of changing their knowledge and their skills. And they go back and try to help based on attitudes in their mind from the beginning. And those attitudes sometimes were considered antecedents to the cause of somebody's death. If the attitude is that, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it anyway, so why should I bother trying to be helpful? If the attitude is that, well, I think that if I were to talk to you directly about suicide, I'd probably be putting the idea into your head, and I don't want to do that, so the safe thing for me to do is just avoid the subject. And these kinds of attitudes were prevalent in emergency rooms, sometimes in crisis centers, in the midst of people who are in helping professions, whether a medical doctor or social worker or nurse or psychologist.
I want to tease that out a little bit because I think that really is the core of what I got out of the Safe Talk training, talking about attitudes. I want to back up just a moment and just get some ground rule language and concepts established, if you could help us out with that. You seem to distinguish between the concept of stigma and the concept of what you're calling these attitudes, these antecedent attitudes.
Yes. When you look at a medical report, like a death certificate or a medical examiner's report, you'll see information that says the primary cause of death was maybe a gunshot wound. But later on in the document, you'll also see whether an opportunity for antecedent information. In other words, was there something that may in fact have triggered, not to use that as a pun, but that might have contributed to the actual direct cause of death. And what we found in reading the literature is that very often it was the attitude that the helping person conveyed to the person who was at risk of suicide. And the attitude